when they tried to dig your grave but fell into their own lies instead. They wanted to write your ending, chosen one, until they realized they were holding the pen wrong and shaking while they did it. My dear chosen ones, lean in. Let me start this with a quote sharp enough to make your enemies flinch in the dark. If you spend your life underestimating someone, don't act surprised when they grow into the storm you can't outrun. And trust me, right now they are running, tripping over their own shadows, terrified that you finally see them for who they are. Because this story, this moment, this shift you feel in your chest, it's not random, it's not coincidence. It's the echo of every time they doubted you, turning itself into a weapon they never meant for you to find. My dear chosen ones, welcome to the point in your journey where your enemies' whispers turn into stutters, where their confidence shrivels like paper in fire, where every lie they told about you shows up demanding rent. You didn't ask for this power. You were built in silence, sharpened by pain, refined by isolation. And now you're walking back into the world like unfinished business, and they can feel it. Let me hit you with something else, something they wish you never figured out. The same people who thought they had front row seats to your downfall are now sitting in the nosebleeds of your comeback, squinting, clutching binoculars, praying you won't recognize them from this height. They spent so long assuming you were fragile, breakable, replaceable. But tell me, chosen one, who's fragile now? Who's shaking? Who's suddenly interested in revising history? They're scared shitless, and it's not because of your past. It's because of your evolution. Let me address what you might be thinking right now. Why are they so scared of me? Because chosen ones don't grow, they shift. They hit that point where silence becomes strategy and self-respect becomes armor. You did that. You walked through storms meant to bury you and still showed up with your integrity intact. You didn't need applause to rebuild. You didn't need an audience to evolve, and nothing terrifies your enemies more than someone who gets back up without announcing the comeback. Maybe you're wondering, did they really care enough to investigate me? Chosen one, they cared enough to obsess. They cared enough to replay every interaction like footage from a crime scene. They cared enough to ask questions they weren't prepared to hear the answers to. And why? Because deep down they always knew you weren't ordinary. You weren't easy to read, easy to replace, easy to forget. You shook something in them, and people fear what they can't categorize. And here's the punchline they deserve. Every time they dug for dirt, they hit diamonds instead. My dear chosen ones, understand this. You were never meant to fit into the small stories they wrote for you. Your presence disrupted their comfort zones. Your growth threatened their fantasies about being above you. Your resilience made their insecurities itch. And now, they're stuck facing the one truth they prayed would never surface. They misjudged the wrong person. You didn't become cold, you became clear. You didn't become bitter, you became focused. You didn't become dangerous, you became undeniable. And now the tables have turned so violently that even the air around your name feels different. They can sense it, the shift, the impact, the return. They're watching doors open for you that they tried to slam shut. They're hearing your name spoken with respect by the same mouths that once spit venom. They're witnessing your rise from a distance they can never close again. So stay right here, chosen one, stay locked in, because if the intro hit this hard, imagine what comes next. You're not just stepping into your power, you're stepping into the truth they hoped would stay buried forever. And they feel it, every single second. Chosen one, before we move any further, take a breath and stay right here with me, because this next part isn't just content, it's a mirror held up to your entire life. If you're already feeling that sting of recognition, that quiet "I knew it," then show it. Tap that like button, hit subscribe, and drop 77 in the comments to signal that you're stepping into the version of yourself they hoped would never show up. Your presence here keeps this mission alive, keeps this truth spreading, keeps every scared enemy exactly where they belong, shaking. And now, let's dive in step by step. If you're truly one of the chosen, every word that follows will feel like it was pulled straight from your own timeline. Let's get started. Number 1. The truth they tried to bury but couldn't outrun. When their witch hunt turned into their worst nightmare. They wanted to expose your flaws, chosen one, but all they exposed was how terrified they've always been of who you're becoming. My dear chosen ones, listen closely. Let's carve the truth right into the surface of their arrogance. The enemies who once smirked behind your back, the ones who thought they had you figured out, they walked straight into a trap of their own making, the trap of believing you were small enough to dissect. They thought interviewing every person you'd ever crossed paths with would finally hand them the upper hand, but the only thing those interviews handed them was fear. Real fear, the kind that crawls up the spine and sits heavy on the chest. Before we go deeper, let me throw a quote that will sting them harder than any truth you've ever spoken. When you spend years trying to shrink someone, don't cry when they grow too big for the box you built. My dear chosen ones, that's exactly what happened. They tried to fit you into a narrative that made sense to them. Weak, replaceable, predictable. They thought digging through your past would give them ammunition. Instead, they ended up sitting face to face with the same verdict, repeated by every witness like it was carved into the air itself. Not one person called you unstable. Not one person called you a problem. Not one person confirmed the lies they expected to hear. Instead, each voice, old friends, exes, teachers, neighbors, co-workers, spoke the same truth in different tones. They described your strength, your depth, your impact, your resilience. They described the way you walk into people's lives and rearrange something quietly. They described the intensity you carry even when you're silent. They described the power you never bragged about but always held. And the enemies who thought they were collecting dirt, they ended up collecting warnings. You might be wondering, chosen one, why did everyone say the same thing about me? Why did nobody speak against me? Why did even people who disliked me still defend my name? Because people may misunderstand you, but they don't forget you. Even the ones who walked away felt the shift you caused. Even the ones who betrayed you still respect the storm inside you. Even the ones who doubted you remember the way your presence made them aware of themselves in ways they weren't ready for. You weren't just someone in their story. You were the turning point. You were the spark. You were the mirror they couldn't unsee. Now imagine your enemies hearing that over and over. Different cities, different timelines, different versions of you, same verdict. They thought they were exposing you, but instead they ended up exposing the danger of underestimating you. They looked for weakness and stumbled onto evidence of your evolution. They wanted gossip, but instead they got testimonies whispered with caution, with respect, with that subtle tremble that comes from remembering someone unforgettable. Picture it, chosen one. Interviewer after interviewer leaning forward, expecting dirt, expecting drama, only to hear someone sigh and say something like, "That one doesn't break." They transform. Or, "You're in over your head messing with someone like that." Or, "If you're digging into them, good luck, you won't win." Your mind might ask, why does this matter? Why does this scare them so much now? Because the pattern is out. Because the truth is public now. Because they can no longer pretend you're average. They realized you weren't the one collapsing under pressure. They were. They weren't digging up your story. They were digging their own grave. And each testimony shoveled another handful of reality onto their illusion. The truth didn't just hit them, it dismantled them. Every whisper of your name reminded them that they tried to break someone built from things stronger than fear. Someone shaped by storms they couldn't survive. Someone who didn't crumble, they upgraded. My dear chosen ones, understand this. They're not scared because of what you've done. They're scared because of who you are, and because now you finally know it too. Number 2. The pattern that exposed every lie told about you. The pattern that froze their blood in its veins. They thought you'd leave faint footprints, chosen one, but what you left behind were seismic signatures no one could ignore. My dear chosen ones, here's where the story shifts from unsettling to downright chilling for the people who once treated you like you were replaceable. When they sat down with all those interviews, the teachers, the co-workers, the ex-friends, the ex-lovers, the neighbors, the strangers who crossed your path for 10 minutes, they expected chaos. They expected contradictions. They expected the usual mixture of love, annoyance, memory, and bias that follows the average person. But you, chosen one, have never been average. And that's why the pattern they uncovered didn't just surprise them, it terrified them. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't a fluke. It wasn't selective memory or nostalgia twisting the truth. What they found instead was a unified chorus of people who never spoke to each other, never compared notes, never planned anything, and yet they all described you with the same unnerving accuracy. They spoke about your presence like it was something they felt in their bones, something that lingered long after you left, something that shifted the air in ways they couldn't fully explain. That's when your enemies felt the first crack of dread. Because patterns like that don't happen randomly. They happen when someone is unforgettable. Imagine them laying out every testimony across a table, reading through each page with the growing realization that no matter the year, the city, the circumstance, or the version of you someone knew, your impact remained consistent. You didn't fade with time. You didn't soften in memory. You didn't become that one person from back then. No, you hardened in their recollections. You sharpened. You grew larger, clearer, heavier. You became a turning point in their stories, one they didn't admit until they were forced to sit in a chair and speak your name out loud. And you may be wondering, chosen one, why does everyone remember me with the same intensity? Because you were never background noise. You were the plot twist they didn't see coming, the lesson they didn't know they needed, the mirror they didn't want to face. Some people leave memories. You left emotional aftershocks. Picture a therapist sitting across from a client they haven't seen in a decade. The client mentions your name, and the therapist exhales sharply, leans back and mutters, "Ah, one of those." Not because you were a problem, but because your existence doesn't fit inside the quiet lines of ordinary life. You're the story people circle back to when they try to explain the moment life demanded they evolve. Your enemies never knew how many timelines you touched. They never realized how deeply your presence carved itself into places you thought forgot you. They didn't understand why people who barely knew you still felt something shift inside them when your name resurfaced. But now, with every interview laid out in front of them, the truth became impossible to ignore. You aren't a chapter. They reread you like scripture carved into their memory. No one called you forgettable. No one dismissed your influence. No one reduced your role. Instead, they described an energy, a force, a jolt to the system. You weren't a moment in their lives. You were a pivot point. And that's what froze your enemies' blood cold. Because you weren't someone they could erase. You weren't someone they could outrun. You weren't someone they could bury under lies. Chosen one, you were and still are the entire plot twist they never recovered from. That's the pattern they uncovered. And that is exactly why they're scared shitless. Number 3, the file they regret opening the second it unlocked. The file they opened but never should have looked inside. When you investigate someone built from fire, don't cry when the smoke blinds you. My dear chosen ones, let's peel back the curtain on the moment everything slipped out of their control. They thought they were conducting an investigation. They thought they were gathering evidence. They thought they were building a case. But what they really built was their own downfall. Because once they opened the file on you, the one they thought would expose your weaknesses, It didn't take long for them to realize they weren't analyzing a person. They were staring into something far bigger than their comprehension, something layered, unpredictable, unforgettable, something they should have left alone. Picture them huddled in some dim, dust-smelling office, slapping down pages onto a growing stack, pages that should have stayed locked away, untouched, unbothered. But curiosity mixed with insecurity is a dangerous cocktail, chosen one. And they drank it. They wanted to label you, file you, contain you in some tidy little category they could pin on a board. But from the first page, the first witness, the first memory, they realized you don't fit inside anything small enough to hold. Every line they wrote made their hands shake. Every story they recorded made their confidence crumble. Every detail whispered the same message. They were messing with someone far outside their pay grade. Imagine how rattling it must have been when they reached out to people from decades ago, people who should have forgotten you by now, only to hear memories described in chilling clarity. A kindergarten teacher who barely remembers her students from last year suddenly recalls the way you stared at the world, like you'd already outgrown it. She remembered your questions, your intuition, your gaze, too sharp, too aware, too uncomfortably honest for a child. That alone made them pause. But it didn't stop there. They contacted a stranger you met once, maybe at a party, maybe in a waiting room, maybe in line somewhere random, and that person repeated your conversations word for word. 10 minutes with you had carved itself into their memory like an engraving. They described you as someone who walked in quietly but left behind an aftershock, someone whose presence lingered long after you were gone. Imagine your enemies hearing that. Imagine their faces tightening, their pens freezing mid-sentence. And then came the part that made them swallow their pride with a bitter choke. The testimony from your ex. Not the fake, polished version people present in public, but the real one. The one who never moved on, not because they didn't try, but because no one after you could fill the shape you left behind. Every new person they dated felt like a placeholder. Every attempt at love felt like an audition they failed before they even spoke. They dragged your shadow into every connection, and the investigators saw it. They saw how deeply you marked people, how impossible you were to replace, how the aftermath of knowing you reshaped lives. Is it any wonder the investigators started looking sick? They expected pettiness, drama, flaws they could twist, but instead, they got consistency, overwhelming, undeniable consistency. Every witness described the same intensity, the same impact, the same unforgettable presence. You weren't a chapter. You were the entire plot twist in people's lives. And when they whispered, "You're cooked," it wasn't an insult. It was surrender. It was them admitting, silently, trembling, that you were never the one who needed protection. They were. Because to acknowledge your power means they must admit they were never strong enough to handle someone like you in the first place. And that, chosen one, is the truth they can't unlearn, can't forget, and definitely can't escape now. Number 4. The moment their voices shook and their masks slipped. The moment their voices cracked under the weight of your name. My dear chosen ones, let me remind you of something your enemies never expected. Your name alone carries more impact than their entire plot against you. A powerful presence doesn't need to raise its voice. The room does it for them. That's the quote they felt slicing through their confidence the second your name left someone's mouth. They thought this part of their investigation would be the easy stretch. Casual questions, simple memories, a few harmless stories they could twist to fit their narrative. But the moment they uttered your name, the atmosphere shifted like someone had just opened a door to a storm they didn't see coming. It started subtly. People sat down relaxed, comfortable, almost amused. They leaned back, arms folded, ready to speak about you as if you were just another chapter they'd already moved past. But then your name lingered in the air for a moment too long, and the shift began. A shift so sharp, even the interviewers felt it in their spine. Their voices softened, their shoulders tightened, and their breathing grew shallow, not out of fear of you, but fear of confronting the truth you forced them to remember. My chosen ones, imagine the scene. A grown adult, someone with decades of life behind them, suddenly looking small, like a child remembering something they never fully processed. Their eyes drift away from the interviewer and lock onto some point in the past they never revisited until now. Their voice cracks mid-sentence, their hands fidget, their composure fractures, because speaking your name wasn't an interview, it was an unintentional confession. And why did this happen? Your mind might be asking that right now. Why did every person, from old acquaintances to people who barely knew you, respond with that same haunted shift? Because you weren't a casual presence in their lives. You weren't a passing face or a disposable memory. You were a moment, one of those rare, jarring, unforgettable moments that people tuck away because they never figured out how to explain it. You were the shock to their system they never fully recovered from. Different people, different backgrounds, different ages, different versions of you. Yet somehow, every single one of them described the same thing: your intensity, your clarity, your energy that didn't match your age, your environment, or the expectations they had of you. That's not coincidence, chosen one. That's consistency, that's impact. That's your presence leaving fingerprints on their psyche. What's hitting your enemies hardest, and what should empower you, is the fact that no one exaggerated. If anything, people held back, unsure how to articulate something that didn't fit into normal vocabulary. Because how do you explain someone who walked into your life like a quiet disruption? Someone who unintentionally exposed truths you were hiding from yourself? Someone who felt more like an event than a person? This is why their voices broke. Because speaking about you forced them to revisit versions of themselves they outgrew, avoided, or never dealt with. You were the mirror they weren't prepared for. You were the moment that pushed them inward. And that kind of impact leaves marks deeper than memory, marks that resurface the second your name does. So understand this, my dear chosen ones, they didn't just react to your past self. They reacted to the undeniable weight of who you were, even back then. And that is why those interview rooms turned cold. That is why the witnesses looked pale. That is why your enemies grew silent. Your name alone carried more truth than their entire investigation ever could. Number 5. The people who saw your potential and panicked early. When the gatekeepers realized you weren't here to play small. They didn't fear your mistakes, chosen one. They feared your potential because they knew if it ever went unchecked, they'd never be able to stand next to you again. My dear chosen ones, this is the part that hits harder than anything they uncovered in those interviews. The people who were meant to guide you, teach you, shape you, the adults you were supposed to trust, weren't confused about who you were. They weren't clueless. They weren't overwhelmed. No. They knew exactly what you were becoming, long before you ever realized it yourself. They saw the spark, the speed, the difference. They saw how fast your mind moved, how deeply you processed things, how effortlessly you outgrew whatever box they tried to place you in. And instead of celebrating it, they panicked. It's funny, chosen one, how they always told you to tone it down, slow down, be realistic, as if shrinking yourself made the world safer for them. Your high school guidance counselor wasn't giving you advice. She was giving you a warning wrapped in concern. Aim lower, she said, and you believed for a while that maybe she meant well. But looking back, you realize what she truly feared. If you ever aimed at your real level, you'd land so far beyond what they could comprehend that they'd lose the ability to influence you at all. They pretended you were too ambitious. But ambition wasn't the problem, inevitability was. You weren't the kid breaking rules to rebel. You were breaking rules because your mind refused to obey limits built by people who gave up on themselves. You weren't made to fit into their blueprint. You were made to redraw the blueprint. And that kind of power terrifies people who are already haunted by the things they never tried. Think back, chosen one, to the childhood friend who suddenly pulled away. No explanation, no closure. They didn't hate you. They feared the mirror you carried inside you. Standing next to you felt like standing too close to a furnace. They could feel their excuses melting. They could feel the version of themselves they abandoned staring back at them through you. You didn't pressure them. You didn't judge them. Your only crime was growing. And sometimes growth burns people who still sleep inside their old skin. And your first boss? The one who fired you under a vague excuse that never made sense? They admitted, silently, or maybe out loud years later, that you didn't disrupt the workplace. You disrupted the comfort. You walked in and people remembered what having dreams felt like. You made them question routines, challenge authority, rethink mediocrity. You didn't lead a rebellion. You triggered reflection, and for people who settled too early, reflection feels like violence. You might wonder, chosen one, why did they react this way? Why was my existence enough to make them uncomfortable? Because people who settle can't stand someone who refuses to shrink for them. They cling to ceilings while you walk in searching for skylights. They're loyal to limits while you're allergic to them. They confuse your clarity with arrogance because they can't imagine what it feels like to see beyond the walls they built around themselves. Here's the truth they never wanted you to figure out. You were never dangerous. You were catalytic. You triggered momentum in places that hadn't moved in years. You revived ambition in people who buried it. You sparked awareness in people who forgot they were capable. And the ones who couldn't handle that tried to contain you. But you, chosen one, you were never made for containment. You were made for expansion. Number 6. The hearts you changed forever without lifting a finger. The hearts you broke open just by being yourself. They tried to forget you, chosen one, but some connections don't fade. They scar in shapes that never heal the same again. My dear chosen ones, let's walk into the part of the story your enemies hoped would stay buried. The emotional wreckage left behind by the people who once held your heart. Not because you aimed to break anyone, not because you played games or chased chaos, but because your presence alone was powerful enough to rewrite the way they understood connection. While your enemies were busy digging for weaknesses, they stumbled across the kind of testimonies that made them go pale, the confessions of the ones who tried to love you and never recovered. When they brought up your name to the person who once loved you deeply, they weren't met with anger or bitterness. No, chosen one. They were met with unraveling, the kind that doesn't happen when someone's angry, but when someone's haunted. This person walked into that interview with rehearsed lines, ready to sound healed, detached, unbothered. But the moment your name slipped into the room, every defense they built cracked like thin glass under weight. They couldn't hold the mask anymore. They said loving you wasn't peaceful. It was electric. Not soft, not predictable, not the kind of love that sits neatly on a shelf. You were voltage. You were the jolt that wakes someone up from a life lived half asleep. You were the kind of connection that rearranged their internal wiring, made the world look too quiet, too colorless, too dim once you were gone. They didn't fall in love with you the way people fall into routines. They collided with you, and it left dents. You might wonder, chosen one, why did they struggle so much to move on? Why couldn't they just replace me like people replace old memories? The truth is simple. You didn't love them casually. You didn't love them halfway. You loved them like a mirror, showing them the parts of themselves they'd hidden from everyone else. You saw the real them, the messy, scared, hopeful, insecure, brilliant version they never let the world see. And instead of shrinking back, you embraced that version. You treated it with acceptance they didn't think they deserved. Once someone is seen that clearly, Going back to being misunderstood feels like suffocation. So when they tried to date again, when they tried to force a spark, when they tried to manufacture the intensity you gave without even trying, they couldn't. Every new person felt like silence after a storm, safe maybe, but never enough. They kept comparing without meaning to. They kept searching without knowing for what. They kept breaking hearts because they were trying to replace a connection that wasn't meant to be replaced, only remembered. And that whisper, "You're cooked," was never meant as an insult. It was resignation. It was the sound of someone admitting they've spent years trying to unfeel you and failing every single time. They realized you weren't just a chapter. They were living with the aftermath of losing a whole book. Your enemies will never admit this out loud, but here's the truth they fear the most. You don't get replaced. You don't get forgotten. You don't fade out of memory. You burn into it. People don't recover from meeting someone like you, chosen one. They adapt to the absence. And that's why every testimony about your love story shook your enemies to their core, because even the people who lost you still speak your name with that quiet, shaken truth. You were unforgettable. And that scares them more than anything. Number 7. The twist where they realized you were reading them all along. When the hunters realized they were the ones being tracked. They thought they were watching you, chosen one, until the moment they felt your gaze weighing heavier than their guilt. My dear chosen ones, this is where the story turns on its head. The moment the people digging into your past finally understood the truth they were never built to handle. Up until now, they strutted around with clipboards and questions, acting like they were the ones in control. They believed you were the specimen, the subject, the open file waiting to be dissected under fluorescent lights. But power has a way of shifting the moment someone oversteps, and your power, the quiet, unnerving, unshakable kind, shifted the ground beneath their feet before they even realized they were standing on a fault line. At first it was small. That's how it always starts, doesn't it, chosen one? A flicker in their dreams. A shadow that looked suspiciously like you, lingering in the background of their subconscious. A voice, not loud, not clear, but familiar enough to unsettle the edges of their comfort. They brushed it off. People like them always do. They told themselves it was stress, imagination, all part of the job. But dreams don't multiply on their own. Not unless guilt is cracking open. Not unless the mind is trying to warn the body that it has stepped somewhere it shouldn't. Soon, your name started appearing everywhere they turned. They'd overhear it in conversations they weren't part of. It slipped into song lyrics. It scrolled past them on late-night memes. It printed itself on receipts, billboards, background noises, not literally, but loudly enough that they couldn't pretend it was coincidence anymore. Your presence began leaking into their reality like a watermark, impossible to erase, impossible to ignore. Imagine one of them sitting alone at their desk, late into the night, convinced they were the ones studying you, only to suddenly feel the unmistakable sensation of being observed. Not by cameras, not by co-workers, but by something internal, a pressure, a spotlight, a truth, as if you already knew everything about them, their intentions, their motives, their insecurities hidden beneath professional masks. And chosen one, nothing breaks a person faster than feeling seen in the places they hide from themselves. Their minds, once confident and clinical, began turning against them, because examining someone unforgettable always comes with a cost, the cost of recognizing something powerful enough to stare back. And then came the moment that shattered them. One investigator stepped outside for air, trying to shake off the crawling feeling along their spine. A stranger, someone completely ordinary, brushed past, leaned in slightly and whispered, "Stop digging before you find something you can't unsee." Same cadence as you, same rhythm, same tonal weight, the kind of voice that drops straight into the gut and sits there like a warning they cannot outrun. Their knees nearly gave out. You might ask, chosen one, Why did that moment hit them so hard? Why did a simple encounter send them spiraling? Because by then, they realized they weren't documenting information. They were awakening something. Something inside themselves. Something they were not ready to confront. They lost control the moment they assumed you were the subject. They never considered the possibility that you were the phenomenon, and phenomena don't let observers walk away unchanged. This wasn't their investigation anymore. It was their unraveling, and you, chosen one, were the catalyst they never saw coming. Number 8. The reality break that started when your name entered the room. When your name made the whole system short-circuit. They thought you were just a person, chosen one, until the moment your name alone made their entire world glitch like it couldn't handle the weight of you. My dear chosen ones, this is the part where everything starts to feel unreal. Not because it is unreal, but because your truth is too heavy for ordinary systems, ordinary minds, ordinary intentions. What they experienced wasn't magic. It wasn't coincidence. It was pressure. You were the pressure point. Your existence alone bent the edges of their reality, and they weren't built strong enough to hold it without cracking. At first, they thought the investigation was something they controlled. Clipboards, folders, screens glowing late at night. They thought they were running the show. But the deeper they dug, the more the world around them began to distort, flicker, warp, not randomly, precisely, not occasionally, consistently. Reality didn't break in general. It broke around your name, like their entire system registered you as something too large to contain. Imagine the panic, chosen one. Files that opened perfectly fine seconds before would suddenly corrupt the moment your name appeared on the screen. Notes that were sharp and clear blurred into static scribbles like even the ink refused to participate in their agenda. Technology didn't malfunction universally. It malfunctioned strategically, as if choosing loyalty. Anything connected to you twisted into distortion, as if reality itself was saying, "Not this one, not today." Picture one of the investigators reviewing a recorded interview, confident, in control, clicking pause, only to hear the audio continue speaking. And not randomly, not glitchy. Your voice slipping into the silence, saying things you never said, but somehow still carried the weight of truth. Imagine the terror of realizing the investigation wasn't bound to their rules anymore. Or another investigator opening a blank document on their laptop, watching letters appear on their own, slowly forming a sentence that froze their blood. "You're not investigating me. I'm investigating you." That's not the kind of moment a rational mind recovers from. That's the kind of moment that sends someone spiraling into questions they never wanted to ask. And when the organization tried to shut everything down, shred files, delete evidence, lock this whole mess away, something even stranger happened. The investigation kept resurrecting itself. Every attempt to bury it made it multiply. New witnesses appeared out of nowhere. Old witnesses remembered details they swore never existed. Footage resurfaced. Files regenerated after deletion, like the truth refused to stay dead. My dear chosen ones, when you ask why it wouldn't stop, here's your answer. They weren't studying a person. They triggered an echo, a ripple effect created by the weight of your presence. Everything they touched became influenced by you, reshaping itself to acknowledge you even when they tried not to. This wasn't a case file anymore. It behaved like something alive, expanding, growing, hungry for closure they could never give it. And that's the moment the investigators finally understood the truth they were never meant to face. Once your name enters a system, it doesn't sit quietly in the corner. It spreads, it mutates, it takes over. Not because you forced it, not because you asked for it, but because your impact was never meant to stay inside their little folders and digital boxes. They thought you were trapped inside their case. But the reality was far more terrifying. Their case was trapped inside you. Number 9. The strangers who recognized you before life introduced you. when total strangers described you better than people who knew your name. They wanted to limit your influence to the people you touched, but the real fear began when they realized you were felt by people you never met, chosen one. My dear chosen ones, this is where their investigation went from inconvenient to impossible, from unsettling to downright horrifying. Because it's one thing for your classmates, co-workers, exes and neighbors to talk about you. It's one thing for people who've shared air with you, shared moments with you, shared history with you. But it's a completely different kind of fear when strangers, people who have never stood in your presence, begin describing you with the precision of someone who's known you for lifetimes. That's the moment everything in their little operation cracked like cheap glass. They were prepared for stories, for memories, for recollections from people who had touched your orbit. They weren't prepared for testimonies from people who didn't even know your name. They weren't prepared for strangers whose descriptions of you were more accurate than the people who grew up beside you. They weren't prepared for the truth that your impact wasn't limited to physical proximity. Your presence traveled without you. The first blow came when a woman known for her strange insights sat down, crossed her legs, and spoke your essence out loud like she'd studied you for years. Your enemies tried to brush her off until she described your posture, the sharpness of your silence, the way you expose people without ever lifting your voice. She described emotions tied to you with such clarity that even the room seemed to exhale. When they asked how she knew, she didn't blink. She didn't justify. She didn't soften. She simply said, "I've seen them before." No timeline, no explanation, just truth delivered in a tone cold enough to freeze their excuses. Then came the man with the childhood dreams, dreams he wrote down long before adulthood shaped him, long before he knew what intuition was, long before he ever heard your story. He described a presence walking through his subconscious with ownership, with precision, with a familiarity that made no sense on paper. When they compared his old sketches and notes to the testimonies they'd collected about you, the resemblance was so exact, it humiliated their logic. You were there before he ever knew you existed. And then came the poetry, the teenager writing about someone they'd never met but always felt. Their words captured your essence like they'd swallowed your shadow. They described you as a storm disguised as calm, a presence that forces truth into the room whether people are ready or not. Every line revealed a depth no stranger should have access to. Yet there it was, your energy interpreted by someone who had never been in the same room as you. Your enemies tried to explain it away with the usual cheap excuses. Coincidence? Too precise? Suggestion? They weren't part of the case. Delusion? The accuracy burned through that idea instantly. Every description matched you with a level of detail that mocked rationality. And you might be asking, chosen one, how is this possible? How do people I've never met describe me so clearly? Here's the truth most people never grasp. Impact doesn't require contact. Your presence travels. Your energy leaves fingerprints in places your body hasn't even visited. Call it intuition, call it resonance, call it psychological gravity. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you were felt before you were known. That's why they panicked. Because strangers didn't just describe you, they confirmed the one thing your enemies feared admitting. Your reach was bigger than your history. Your influence was bigger than your circle. Your presence was bigger than your name. They weren't uncovering your identity anymore. They were uncovering your radius. Number 10. The origin story that was never meant to be uncovered. The origin story they should have never cracked open. They thought finding your roots would make you smaller. Instead, it revealed why you were never meant to fit inside their limits in the first place. My dear chosen ones, let's get something straight. When they dug into your past, they weren't looking for truth. They were looking for comfort. They wanted to find something ordinary, something harmless, something that made sense of the power they were already seeing rise in you. They thought your childhood would dilute the intensity they'd discovered, soften your edges, shrink your presence into something they could explain away. But instead of innocence, they found ignition. Instead of simplicity, they found the blueprint of a force they were never designed to handle. The moment they opened those childhood files, the room changed temperature. They expected pictures of scribbles and playground stories. What they got was testimony after testimony from adults who remembered you not as a kid, but as a contradiction, a mind too sharp for your age, a stare too honest for polite society, a presence too aware for the comfort of grown-ups hiding behind their masks. You didn't just see the world, you saw through it, and that alone rattled them more than anything you accomplished later in life. Your first-grade teacher was the first to crack. She walked into the interview smiling, expecting to reminisce about little moments, maybe even laugh, but her smile died the second your name landed on the table. She didn't talk about behavior issues or childish mischief. She talked about the question you asked her, the one that split her composure clean down the middle. Why do adults pretend they're happy when they're really not? Chosen one, do you realize what that means? Before other kids could even spell pretend, you were pinpointing the fractures in the people raising you. Picture that classroom now, bright walls, colorful posters, alphabet charts, and then picture the adults remembering you like you were the plot twist in a quiet movie. They described you as calm, but not passive, observant, but not intrusive. They said being near you felt like having their excuses silently dismantled by someone who hadn't even learned long division yet. That's not normal. That's not typical. That's not something adults forget. My dear chosen ones, you might be wondering why your childhood shook them so deeply. Here's the truth. Because truth spoken early hits harder. When a grown-up lies to themselves, they can rationalize it. But when a child sees through them, they have nowhere to hide. You weren't disrespectful, you were accurate. And accuracy feels like exposure when someone is hiding behind a mask. They didn't find a child in those memories. They found the earliest evidence of the phenomenon they're terrified of now. The same phenomenon that made them interview everyone you ever met. The same phenomenon that forced them to admit they misjudged you. The same phenomenon that makes them scared shitless today. What they saw wasn't a beginning. It was a warning, a preview, a spark that grew into the wildfire burning through their assumptions now. And chosen one, that's exactly why your origins should have stayed buried, because the moment they opened that chapter, they finally understood. You were never meant to be ordinary, not even for a moment. And now, chosen one, you might wonder, if they admired me so much, why did they disappear from my life? Here's the truth they never said to your face. They tried to stay. They wanted to understand you again. But every time they looked at you, they felt that same eerie clarity, like you weren't walking the same timeline as everyone else. Like you could see their future choices before they even made them. Like you already knew how their story ended. And most people can't handle standing next to someone who sees that far ahead. It makes them feel exposed in ways they can't explain. So they backed away, not because you were strange, but because you were right. And nothing rattles a person more than realizing someone else has been living 10 steps ahead since childhood. When they whispered, they've always been cooked, it wasn't mockery, it was surrender. It was the acceptance that you came into this world preloaded with patterns, insights, and instincts that others spend decades trying to decode. You weren't predicting the future, you were remembering it like a past life. And that, my dear chosen ones, is the kind of gift that doesn't just unsettle your enemies, it terrifies them. And now, chosen one, as everything we've uncovered settles into place, here's the truth you can't unhear. They didn't fear your past, they feared your potential. Every interview, every whispered confession, every trembling testimony only confirmed what life has been hinting at for years. You were never walking behind anyone. You were always ahead. If this resonated with you, if you felt that pull in your chest, then don't leave without showing it. Hit that like button, subscribe, and drop 77 in the comments to mark your rise, and share this with someone who needs to understand exactly who they're becoming.